Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to set goals so that you can reach English fluency. And this is something really important that I talk to my students about very regularly, especially in our first lessons, but generally as we're going through the process, it's something I like to talk about really regularly because having clear goals, objectives, targets, whatever you want to call them, it's really important to help you actually improve, to make progress and to feel motivated because you can actually see that you're moving forward and moving through the levels. So I want to show you a technique that I use as a teacher and as a student to help make those goals really clear, help make an action plan of how to actually achieve them, and also how to avoid potential problems along the way so that when life eventually inevitably gets in the way, it doesn't stop us in our tracks and we stop all of that great progress that we've been making. So stick around if you want to see exactly how we're going to do that. The whole idea of this is all about setting very clear goals. So everyone has a dream when they're learning English. And so we want to be able to really sort of identify that dream, then make a plan and actually achieve it. So as we're going through this, make sure you get a pen and paper. Don't worry, you'll have a couple of seconds now. So get something that you can actually write things down. You can take notes and you can actually do some planning for yourself. Also, if you're watching this video, you will also see that there's going to be a video where I demonstrate this as well. So make sure you check that out and you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more of these updates. So the plan for today then, as I've mentioned already, is really going to be about understanding your goals clearly, because if you don't understand what the goal actually is, there's no way you're ever going to reach it. So if you're already writing down your goal is to be fluent, we're going to actually look at that in a little bit more detail, and we're going to be able to break it down so we actually have a very clear, specific idea of exactly what that means to you, because it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. Then what the idea is, now we have the destination, we want to plan a logical path all the way up to that final destination or the current destination, because remembering it's not really final, it's just the first step, and then we need a new goal in the future. And as part of this process, something I always like to focus on is avoiding potential problems before they happen. So actually thinking about what problems might happen, planning for them, and then so, when everything's not exactly going to plan or something comes up and your normal routine's thrown out of whack, then you can already have a backup plan in mind, and then it keeps you moving and keeps you making progress. So before we look at the actual thing, I want you to take a second. So just take a second and think, what is your English goal? Okay, so I actually want you to take a second now, so I'm going to keep speaking, but get a pen and paper and actually just write something down. So when I'm talking about your goal, this is really your English dream. Where do you see yourself in the future? What do you want to be able to do? What's the idea? Why are you learning English? So everyone's goals are going to be a little bit different based on, what they do for work, what they are doing in their life, or just the whole reason why you even started looking at English. So having a clear idea of the goal is the very first step. So like, for example, I can tell you about some of my goals. So in Spanish, I'm a beginner. So let's say A1, A2 level, for those of you who know that formula. And so my goal at the moment is really just about studying regularly, building a really consistent habit so that I can just start to make slow progress. So I'm not going on holiday, I'm just learning it for fun. So at the moment, that's really my goal, is just to get into a good habit of practicing a little bit of Spanish every day. Whereas Italian, I'm at an upper intermediate level, so let's say B2. And in that one, I'm really trying to focus on now reaching that advanced level. So I'm trying to develop the way I speak, improving my vocabulary and my understanding of tenses, just while I'm reading and while I'm listening. But the real thing is I'm trying to copy the way that Italian speakers speak so that I can sound more natural, sound more Italian. So for anyone who's in that sort of upper intermediate level and you always feel like you kind of say everything in a more like sort of your native language way, so I think I always sound like I'm just sort of saying stuff but in an English way, that's kind of the idea, is I want it to sound like Italian people would say it. So there's just a couple of ideas of things I'm working on, but I'd be really interested to see what your goals are. So make a note of those and then you can tell me about it once we've gone through the whole process. So This process is exactly as I've just mentioned. So we have the steps down the left-hand side, and we start by identifying your specific goal. So we're going to take what you've just written down and we're going to actually add some detail and ask ourselves lots of questions. And you'll notice throughout this whole process, a lot of it is focused on asking yourself questions, because you should be able to do this by asking yourself lots of questions, and the answers you give will actually then create the plan, create the specific goal, and all of the other stuff we need. Once we have that specific goal, we're going to be looking at what you're missing. So we're going to be looking at the things that you need to learn to reach that goal. And then we're going to be learning on how you figure out how you find those, how you learn about them, how you break them down to get those things to reach that goal. So basically, we're working our way back from the final destination. So that's how this whole thing works. And then the potential problems are kind of that planning in advance to identify things before they come up. And then the final step you'll notice I've added on there is to get started, which is probably the most important, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So talking about your specific goal then. So I have this all the time with students, all the time in lessons. I say, what's your goal with English? What do you want to do? And they say, I want to be fluent, which is great. But then when I ask them, what does that mean? It's sometimes quite difficult to actually identify what it is, because everyone has this idea of being fluent. And actually, even if you look at native speakers, fluency can mean a whole range of things. So if you look at, for example, someone who has studied a PhD, like a professor at Cambridge or something like that, if you look at the way they speak their knowledge in English compared to someone who, for example, didn't go to university and was never very academic in school, even between those two native speakers, their level in English, their vocabulary, their use of the language is very, very different. So just saying fluent doesn't really mean much. So I like to ask myself a couple of these questions because it really helps me to focus on the actual skills, abilities, and knowledge that I'm trying to achieve or trying to reach. So first of all, it's what will I be able to do? So what will you be able to do? When you reach your goal, whether that's your final goal, whether that's the current goal, what is it that you can imagine that you can do in English that you can't do right now? Okay, so whether that's being able to have a normal conversation without hesitating, whether that's being able to interact in a meeting at work and not feel like you're slowing down the conversation, whether it's one of my favorites, just being able to watch a TV series without subtitles. Could be something as simple as that, or to read your first novel in English. So whatever it is, we want to focus on an actual skill or knowledge, because that ability that you want to learn, to develop, is what we are then going to work towards. And when you get there, it's also really important to visualize it. How will you feel when you reach that goal, when you can do that thing that you're really looking to do? How are you going to feel? Because you need to know, and you need to think in your mind that it's possible. If you are telling yourself consciously or subconsciously that you're never going to reach fluency, you will never reach fluency. So you have to be really positive about it. So how are you going to feel? If you can watch a TV series with no subtitles, how cool is that going to be? How brilliant is that going to be? If you can give a presentation at work to your boss and you don't have any hesitations and you answer their questions really easily, how's that going to make you feel? Because once you imagine that, then you're already telling yourself, okay, this is going to be possible. I'm actually going to be able to do this thing. And then you also want to look at what problems you won't have. So often I like to ask, what are your current problems? I often ask my students this question. And then imagine that. What problems are you going to remove? When you reach your goal, what problems are you going to go, I don't have that anymore. I don't have that anymore. Is it in a conversation you understand perfectly what people are saying? Is it that when you're writing an email, you don't need to go to Google Translate, or you don't need to keep searching for words because you can just produce the email very naturally? So whatever it is, also looking at what problems you're going to get rid of, again, is kind of focusing our attention. So on the things that we want to do and the things that we don't want to do anymore. And so once you have an answer to all of these questions, now you should have a much more specific goal. So often, for example, if we take the fluency example, a lot of people will say, I want to be fluent. And when I break it down, actually what they mean is I want to be able to understand what native speakers say in conversation, and I want to be able to express my ideas more clearly. And so now we have two key things that we want to be actually working on. Whereas the fluency thing, it's like saying, I want to be better. It doesn't really mean much on its own. So now we have a lot more detail. So step 2, we need to identify what you are missing. Okay, so the whole idea of this is that you've just chosen your final destination and you're here. And so what you actually need to be figuring out is, what is it that you need to put in this space to make you reach that final point? So that's why we want to look at these other questions that I've also prepared, so you can see all of these here. And also remember, this presentation is all available, so check the link in the description under the video. You'll be able to download it for free, and then you can keep this so that you can use it regularly to improve. So the questions then. What new skills do you need to develop? Or what new knowledge do you need to acquire? So really this is just identifying, if I want to understand native speakers in conversation, let's say, what skills do I have which need to improve? And what skills don't I have which I need to improve? And by identifying the new skills and the current skills you have to develop, that then is focusing our attention on what you need to study, how you need to study, and how often, the resources, all of that stuff. So if I'm identifying I don't understand people in conversation, then I probably need to work on my listening comprehension. I probably need to work on my vocabulary, as well as a couple of other things. But then now I have some clear things to work on. So I need to learn vocabulary. I need to improve my listening comprehension. So now this is suddenly becoming much more practical, much more useful, because we've got getting a list of key things. So you want to do this, and you should have a good list of maybe 4, 5, possibly even more, of different skills that you need to improve and how you need to improve them. So again, remember, be specific. If you need to learn vocabulary, what vocabulary? Is it business vocabulary? Is it slang? Is it, if you're talking about listening comprehension, is it about speed? Is it accent? But it could be lots of these things. And that's okay, because when you have this big list, you don't need to do them all at once, because you can also prioritize these points. You can work on whichever is the most useful or the most important, and then attack the other ones a little bit later. But it's important to identify all of them, so then you can figure out a way of reaching those points. Now we have a list of all of the skills you need to develop and the final destination which you're trying to reach. So now we need to identify the way in which you find, develop, and learn these new skills to reach your destination. So what we want to be looking at is identifying the resources and the processes which are going to help you to do these things. So let's say, again, we talk about vocabulary. And you've been specific, and you said you need to learn medical vocabulary because you're going to be getting a job in a hospital, for example. So the resources that you need to use are going to be medical related. So whether you want to find some medical podcasts that are talking about the latest developments in medical science, whether you want to watch reality TV shows or that are set in hospitals, or maybe even like dramas that are set in hospitals, so you can get a little bit of that natural conversation in that context. Maybe actually your focus is about vocabulary, but it's more about reading because you're going to go and study a PhD, for example. So in that case, then you want to be reading more than listening. So again, that's why finding these skills and these gaps is really important to be specific, because if your plan is to improve your reading, you need to do more reading. If your plan is to improve conversation, you need to do more listening and speaking, because that's what you need. Doing reading is still going to be good, but the closer you can get the skill to what you're actually going to do, the more easily it works. So, and when I talk about resources, my advice is keep it simple. So choose one. If you want to find a video, find one. If you want to find a podcast, find one. I generally find that's better, because otherwise it's a bit like when you open Netflix and you just want to find a film. There's so many choices. You spend more time looking through all of the different things that you think you might study, and then you never actually study. So it's better to do something than nothing. Now we have a list of resources. We have a list of processes, the way you think you're going to learn your skills. You have the skills you need and the destination. So we're working all our way back now. So we're at the point today where we can get started. So why don't we just get started? Why is that the next step? Well, I believe that actually sitting down and taking a second and looking at potential problems before they happen and before you even get started is a really good investment in time. Because what can often happen is you sit down and go, yeah, I'm going to study every day, I'm going to go, and you just get started. And then what happens is something happens, you need to go away for a couple of days, or, maybe there's a couple of days where you don't sleep very well, or, something happens, and then the plan that you had just doesn't work anymore. And as soon as then you lose that momentum, suddenly you kind of stop, or things get in the way, and then you're back to square one where you aren't studying. And this happens all the time. I speak to students all the time where they tell me that they were studying really well every day for maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They had a little business trip, or maybe they had some family commitments, or they had a little holiday, and then all of a sudden they aren't watching anything, they're not practicing, they're not studying, and then they're just feeling really demotivated because they're just completely out of the habit. So doing this is going to help you avoid that. So what you want to do now is a separate list, a new list, if you like, and it's going to be listing problems or situations which you think will stop you reaching this goal. So the things that will stop you, for example, using the resources that you found, learning the skills that you've said you want to develop, or reaching the goal. So anything we've talked about before. So let's say, for example, you are going to be focusing on YouTube videos because you want to do lots and lots of listening. So maybe one of the potential problems is that sometimes you're not at home and you don't have an internet connection. So that means that you can't watch YouTube. Or, for example, you want to read a book, but maybe you can't take the book to work, or you can't take it with you, and so you don't always have the book with you when you want to read, just as an example. So these are simple things where you're thinking about, in life, when stuff happens, what could happen which could stop me doing these things, using the resources or learning these skills. And then once you have one of these problems, you just want to think of a way either how you can avoid it completely, or when it happens, how you can minimize the impact of it. So let's talk about the YouTube ones. Okay, so maybe one solution is, for example, I have YouTube Premium because I don't like having adverts when I'm watching videos with my students. So I can download the videos. So actually that's something that I will do. If I know I'm going to be out and about and I'm not going to have my internet connection, or maybe it's a little bit sketchy, then I will actually download the videos in advance so I know I definitely have them ready when I need them. But let's say, for example, you don't have that and it's not an option because actually, it costs some money. So maybe you just want to use YouTube because it's free. So how do we reduce that impact? Okay, so if we don't have an internet connection, is there something else we can do which is very similar, which is going to give us the same result? So, for example, is there a podcast we can download? Is there some music that you have on your phone? Is there a different way you can do it that doesn't require the internet? Do you have a laptop where you can put a CD in, or can you watch something on TV? So whatever it might be, just finding an alternative in advance just means when that situation happens, you're like, oh yeah, I don't have the internet, but I know when I don't have the internet, I'm going to do this instead. And so suddenly now you don't even have to think about it. In the moment, you already have a plan and you just move on to backup number 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so let's talk about, for example, the book scenario. So you have a physical book, you have an actual book, and you want to read it. But let's say you forget it, or you, for example, want to take notes, but you're finding it a bit, difficult to use. So in that case, then looking at an ebook, maybe changing the book and reading an article on your phone, or reading on the computer because then it's easier to take notes. So, or for example, maybe you do read on the computer, but sometimes you just don't have your computer available. So can you read it on your phone? Or do you actually want to have like a backup book? So in your pocket, you keep a little tiny book, and then when you can't find anything, you just open that book instead. So again, all of these things are either trying to prevent it completely. So like downloading the videos, that just removes that problem completely. It just doesn't exist. Or you find something that's just going to make it easier to just still learn the skills you're trying to learn, but maybe it's not the most effective, but it's still better than nothing. The final step, get started. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time. Get started. Okay, so the reason I'm really emphasizing this final point is it's actually the most important. Even if you ignored everything I said before this, which you shouldn't, by the way. If you have ignored it, you need to go back and listen to it again. But this is the most important, because if you do all the planning, you do all the preparation, you find all of your resources, and then you don't start, what is the point? You're never going to actually reach your goal if you don't actually just start studying, start learning, start practicing. So this is where to avoid this problem, which actually you'd be surprised how often I hear about it, where people just say, oh, I've wanted to do this for such a long time, but then I just never got started. And I'm guilty of this as a student as well. And so I tend to do this in a different way. I collect all of my resources in advance. So if you remember the list of filling those gaps, the things that you want to do, so videos, podcasts, books, articles, websites, anything I'm going to try and use, I collect all of those. So I tend to use lots of digital ones, but if I'm reading books, I keep a pile of those books maybe next to my bed or on my desk, and I get all of those in advance. So there's no excuse. I don't have to go, oh, I need to find an article. I've already found the article. Then I pick an actual date that I'm going to start. So this is really important, because if you set a date, like I did, for example, when I started doing these types of videos, I decided, right, I'm going to do it today, and I just did it. So, and it's really important you do that, because otherwise you can spend so much time doing all the planning and the preparation, and then it's like, oh, actually, I need to find some more videos, so I'll wait until next week, or I'll wait until tomorrow. And then actually it just never happens. So it's better to start sooner or on a specific day, and then you can adjust and you can change later. It's not permanent, okay? That's really the kind of important thing to remember. And then finally, you can tell people about it. So this is something a lot of people use, whether if you like social media, you can post about it online, you can tell your friends, you maybe, for example, like I do, I put things in my calendar like an appointment. So it's kind of an appointment with myself, but I try and book them in, because then it's of either somebody else knows about it or it's in my calendar, so I feel accountable. So I feel like if I don't do it, then I'm letting myself down, or I'm letting somebody else down. And so it helps me to focus and go, okay, well, I've said I'm going to do this, so I need to stick to my word. And if you're not sure, if you don't know when to start, if you feel like it all seems a little bit difficult, start now. Even if you have no resources, even if you just literally sit down, open up YouTube or search for something and just get started, that is better than spending the next month trying to find the perfect plan and not actually doing anything. So if you aren't sure about when to start, if you're not sure how you're going to get started, just get started, and then you can learn along the way. So as a student, before I became an English teacher, most of my learning was self-directed. So actually I spent a lot of time figuring stuff out myself. So I spent a long time doing stuff which actually was just a complete waste of time. But I learned how to improve it, and I still learned things along the way, but now I know much more effective ways to do things. So that's really the important thing, is if I had never started, for example, learning Italian, then I would never have reached the level I am now, even though if I went back and started again, I could probably reach this level in less than half the time, probably even less than that now. And so when I'm learning new languages, I learn them much more effectively. But that doesn't mean I didn't learn. It just means now I know better. And next year, I will know better than I do now, and in 10 years. So it's really important that you just get started. Okay, so one more time. What do we do at the end? Get started. Okay, that's enough. So now I want to share some tips with you that are hopefully going to make this a little bit more effective, because I know it can sound really daunting, and obviously hopefully it makes this sound very easy when I'm explaining it like this. And this is just from lots of experience of setting goals myself, helping my students set goals. And so, I don't want you to think that it's, oh, it's just easy, and if you're finding it a little bit tricky, then, that's a problem. It's not. The first thing you need to do is accept you don't know everything yet. So no matter how experienced you are, no matter how many languages you've learned, you don't know everything. And that's okay. That's all right. It's fine. We all have stuff we don't know, and that's okay. So really, you need to kind of think about two key things when we're thinking of all of this stuff: is work with what you know. there's going to be stuff that you already know from your previous experience, from studying at school, from seeing videos, from talking to people. So work with that. Start with that as a basis. And then remember, the plan can change. Even if you do it for 2 days and you're like, this isn't working, and you change it, that's perfectly fine. That's okay. It doesn't have to be a permanent plan. It doesn't have to be a 5-year plan. You can literally just say, I'm going to try this for a week and just see what happens. And really, the plan should change, because as you're going through the process, you're going to learn more. You're going to understand things that you didn't understand before. You're going to find things that you need to learn which you didn't even know existed before. And so the plan will develop over time. So whether you make a plan for the whole of this year or whether you make a plan for the next 2 days, just accepting that that plan is never going to be permanent and it should change along the way, hopefully should help you also start, because really, it doesn't matter if the plan's perfect because you can just change it tomorrow. So just get started. Again, get started. And then the other thing you can do is ask for advice. Okay, so this might sound very, very obvious, but if you don't know and you've never really set goals for English before, this isn't something that you've really done before at all, then it can be quite difficult to identify the things you need to learn, the processes, maybe what the best resources are. And so that's when you actually just need to ask people who know a little bit better. So teachers, for example, I always tell my students to ask me if they're doing this kind of thing, and we can actually talk about it and I can give them my recommendations from a teacher's perspective and also as a native speaker. So also, for example, if you're a beginner or an intermediate level, speaking to an advanced level English student, like someone who has learnt it for a long time and is at a very good level, they still know more than you. They might not know everything, but it doesn't matter because they know more than you and they can give you some advice of how they reached the level they're at. So even as a complete beginner, if someone's intermediate, they're going to be able to help you in that initial stage. So any advice like that is still going to be very, very useful. And you can also ask people who are just seasoned language learners. So maybe they've not learned the language that you've learned, but maybe they've learned something similar, or they've learned lots of different languages, so they have different ideas of how to study, or they're just interested in the whole language learning process. So this, as a teacher, I use a lot because I like learning lots of different languages. So I often can make connections with different styles of languages and different approaches you need depending on what you're learning, and I kind of try to put all of that together, which is why I share these techniques. So it's good to know that you don't know everything and that you should and you can ask other people for help. And hopefully that means now that once you've asked for help, you should have a lot more information and a much better idea. Okay, and remember, if you're still not sure at this point and you've got anything about your current goal that you're not quite sure exactly what you should do, just stick a comment below, and then I can come back and I can give you a hand along the way. And then finally, review. So, as I mentioned, the plan will and it should change. And so what you need to do is actually regularly review your goals, your skills, your processes, your resources, and actually decide whether they're working, whether they're not working, and what we need to do. So I've got a list of questions here, but it's really the idea of saying, has anything changed? Is my goal the same? Is the activity still working? Is the resource still fun? Because sometimes you'll start a series or you'll start watching a channel and then eventually it just gets a bit boring. And so rather than just watching it because that's what you've said you're going to watch, if it's boring, pick something else. If you're writing a diary every day and you don't actually feel like you're learning anything because you're making the same mistakes over and over, then don't write a diary, do something else. So it's just really doing that self-analysis of saying, is this working for me? Am I making progress? Is it helping me reach that goal? And so you remember, you have that plan now. Is it helping me learn one of the skills that I'm trying to learn? If it's not, do you need to do it? Because if your goal is improving your listening comprehension and you're just doing loads of writing is still going to improve your English, but it's a completely different area. So it's just deciding, am I happy to spend that time doing that? Or do I want to spend that valuable time doing something which is actually going to hit one of these skills that I need to reach my goal? And Then it's also thinking about the processes. So how you're studying, when you're studying, where you're studying. Is there anything that you can do to make it more comfortable, easier? Like, is there anything that you can actually do? And so all of this review is going to be really, really helpful, because after a week or a month or 6 months, you're going to be able to look at it critically and say, this can improve. And if you improve the process, if you improve your goals, you're going to learn more easily, you're going to learn more quickly. And this is why it's something I recommend that you do maybe once a month. I tend to do it once a month because I think it's always a good time at the start of the month to have a look at it. But even if you do it at the end of each week and you just kind of do a quick self-analysis and you just say to yourself, oh, how's this working? And then that review, that regular practice is going to help. And again, going back to the previous tip, if you're not sure if it's working, ask for advice. Talk to a teacher, talk to your friends, talk to somebody who speaks the language, and actually just see what they think. Do they think you're actually making progress or not? If they don't think you are, or you don't think you are, then what are you going to change? And then you kind of go back to the same thing, that something in the process needs to change, you need to test it, and then you need to keep going. But anything that you're learning is going to be valuable. But because time is so limited, using this kind of process is going to help you really focus your attention and make sure the work that you're doing is actually helping you reach those goals. And I always mention about being positive. I think it's something that's super important in language learning and in life in general. And so this saying you're going to be seeing a lot through all of these presentations and these videos. It's the mantra that I use for language learning, for life, and it's I can, I will, I must. So anytime you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm not going to reach fluency, I can't understand what people are saying, remember, I can reach fluency, I will reach fluency, and I must reach fluency. So when you think like this, there is nothing that's impossible. It's just something that you can't do yet. And with time, with practice, and with hard work, you can get there. And there we have it. The end of the presentation, the end of the goal setting, and I hope you found this really useful. I hope you found it helpful, and I would love to hear about your goals and your plans and what resources you're going to be using. So make sure you put loads of comments below, and then I can give you my advice and tips. So if you're on YouTube, have a fantastic day. Have a fantastic day learning English, and if you're on Twitch, let's keep going.